Hello, hello. Welcome to my channel and in turn my podcast of Cats Culture Counter. Now, I did my part one of the Foundation of Culture in the United States, and I covered blues music. So if you have not checked that out, please check that out. If you do find value in this podcast, please subscribe, like it, share it with anyone that wants to learn more about these musical genres. And I would really appreciate that. This is so fun. It's incredibly fun learning about these different musicians that I've learned a little bit about previously or know a little bit about previously, and doing a deep dive into them and their histories and how they affected these genres is fundamental and essential. And the knowing that the Black community was instrumental in the culture of the US, that should go without saying, right? We know. We know. Unless you're in denial, you know. But anyway, I digress. Digress. You feel me? I'm sure you understand. Okay, so today we did blues, and today we're doing jazz. Now, jazz is near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I have listened to on and off as almost a daily occurrence for decades. I love singing jazz. My son has found his home mostly in the jazz genre. He is an upright bass player, and I've always had mad respect for it because for me, it feels, some people think that it's like kind of all over the place, but for me, it feels emotional. And when you think of soundtrack to your life or of your life, that makes sense sometimes, right? Jazz music makes sense a lot of times more so than other genres because life can be hectic, out of control, emotional, or very smooth and rewarding. And for me, that's what jazz does. Now, the first musician, because we're going to go kind of like, I like to go kind of like in chronological order, not in the actual like impact that the musician had. Sometimes that will correlate, but I'm just doing chronological order, and it definitely makes sense because that's how jazz progresses, right? And that's how people come into it and make more of a impact, lasting impact. The first one we're doing is Charles Joseph Buddy Bolton. Now, they named him. His nickname was Buddy. He was born September 6, 1877, and passed November 4th, 1931. Now, he was a cornetist. He was American, and he was a key figure in the development of like the New Orleans jazz, what they called JASS. So it had a different spelling, or ragtime music. So he's not, it's not like he put that that label on himself. Other musicians recognized um, his giving and musicianship and style and modeling of the form. Now, he was born to his father's name was Westmore Bolton. Now, he was a driver for a man named William Walker, who actually was his grandfather's enslaver. Picture that. Gustavus Bolton was his grandfather's name. And he was born in Louisiana and died in 1866. That's his grandfather. Now, he was born in slavery. Okay, even though there's no records that actually like say he was born in slavery, but pretty sure his mother, Alice. She was 18 years old when she married Westmore Bolton, And that was in 1873. Now, Westmore was around 25, but in 1866, the record shows he was 19. So we'll see. So Buddy's father's passed when he was 6 years old. And then so he started living with family members, with his mother, with family members. And then they spell the name different. Like my maiden name, it changed. It changed to more like an English last name, and there's no telling how that goes into it. But with his name, they spelt it in different ways, like Bolen, Boldan, Bolding, Bolding. So it makes it hard for people to like really, really search. But they do know for sure that he likely attended the Fisk School in New Orleans, and but their early records are, other schools it's missing. So he was known as King Bolton, so jazz royalty, and he was actually at his peak in New Orleans around 1900 to 1907. Now, that's the thing about jazz. Improvisation. Me and my words. And his sound, like his skills at improvising were next level, and he had a very loud sound. So the younger musicians were like, whoa, who is this cat? Because, it's a different sound that draws them to it. Now, his trombonist, Willie Cornish, they were called making like a phonograph cylinder of the recordings of the Bolton Band, but unfortunately, none of that is known to have survived. Oh man, could you imagine? That would be absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, other jazz musicians, they say that Bolton and his bandmates came up with what would be known as jazz, like recognizable jazz in its best form, right? Now, though it was not a common music until after he was active musically. So, that happens sometimes with artists, musicians, after what they've given to the art form is like, does not become relevant until after they've left or they've passed away. But Ted Gioia, now his historian, because I love finding information from historians. He's Ted Gioia, Gioia. He labeled Bolton as the father of jazz, and people say, "Really?" But it was pretty evident that he was, and there was no one that would say he was not. If he did it, then he's saying he mastered the recipe for it. So the recipe makes a cake, right? Now, what is the style of jazz? So it's the rhythms of ragtime, and then it's bent note and chord patterns of the blues, along with instrumentation that's drawn from like New Orleans brass bands and string ensembles. So you can read about it in New History of Jazz by Alan Shipton, and Alan spelled Alyn. And I tell you, I don't think that you're going to find anyone that can argue against it about him being the pioneer of the jazz form. And now he also was known to have kind of had some ideas that were kind of adapted into gospel music that are in African American Baptist churches. So you see in the MC Handy, which was in part 1, how he had Baptist like ministers were in his family, and he decided not to go that route, but he was kind of formed in the church, like him, like probably hearing the music. It had to have had some type of effect. Now, but instead of like, because you think, okay, so how did he make it different? He played the music he heard by ear. So instead of imitating other people by ear and adapted it to his horn. And because of that, that's where he's coming into like a fusion of kind of like black sacred music, ragtime, marching band music, and rural blues. So all of that coming together to make this wonderful recipe of the genre jazz. I think that learning that and learning like, because you hear jazz and you're like, okay, this kind of speaks to me, right? This kind of speaks to me. This kind of speaks to me. And you like, you hear that and you're like, that makes sense, right? Totally makes sense. Now, he was credited also with the invention of the Big Four. It's a rhythmic innovation of like a marching band beat, which gave like early jazz more room for like improvisation by individuals. And Wynton Marsalis actually says that the Big Four was the first like syncopated bass drum pattern to deviate from the standard on beat march. So that's significant because then you're like having a little bit of a touch or a lot of a touch into the formulation of these rhythms and standards that other musicians can follow and imitate, improvise, be influenced by. Now, the second half of the Big Four, also known as habanera rhythm, and that was it's sub-Saharan African music traditions. Yeah, so it is pretty cool learning about it, right? The only thing that's unfortunate is like there's like firsthand oral history about Bolton, but facts about his life, they're kind of lost in everything. The stories about him being a barber, or that he published the Cricket, which was a scandal sheet, and even though they were, it was repeated, even though they were debunked. So it's like you want to learn more about him, and there's lots of like tribute. There's lots of musical tributes, and then there's also books about him, so you can definitely learn more about him. I hope you enjoyed learning about Buddy Bolton. I tell you, Bolden. Why do I want to say Bolton? Bolden. Quite a cool cat. And he was definitely the pioneer of jazz and was instrumental in giving us the foundation of the culture of jazz music. Stay tuned for my next musician. Okay, now if you are a love of jazz, there's no way you have not heard of Jelly Roll Morton. No way. That would be crazy. His name was Ferdinand Joseph Lamont, later Morton. So it was changed. He was born in on September 20th, 1890. Why do I keep doing that? 1890. And he passed on July 10th of 1941. And he was known as Jelly Roll Morton. Now, he was a pianist, band leader, and composer, and he kind of morphed blues and jazz, and he was a composer of Louisiana Creole. He was of Louisiana Creole descent, so that he's like a nice little mixture ethnically. But he was jazz's first arranger. Now that made the solidified the fact that it was rooted in improvisation and that it can retain like characteristics that were essential for identifying and developing the form, the genre. And his composition that was published in 1915, that's Jelly Roll Blues. And that is one of the very first published jazz compositions. Now, he also claimed to have invented the genre, but I think that goes back to Buddy. But he does claim that he invented it, and he was so instrumental. So it's like, mm, Some people may agree or disagree. If you agree that Jelly Roll was the original pioneer, comment below. Now let's talk about some of the songs they did. King Porter Stomp, Black Bottom Stomp, Wolverine Blues. I thought I heard Buddy Bolton say, and then the last one, the latter one being a tribute to New Orleans musicians from around the 20th century. Now, people have criticized that. They're saying that he did a lot of bragging about the fact that he was exaggerating his worth and what he actually um, did as far as being the originator. They were so vast. Um, I think that's the music critic Scott Yano. He says that Morton's accomplishments as an early innovator are so vast that he did not really need to stretch the truth, but he may have. On the other hand, Gunther Schuller says that they're hyperbolic assertions and there's no proof to the contrary. And his considerable accomplishments in themselves provide reasonable substantiation. Well, because you're thinking about his um, when he was alive, right? When he was alive and when he passed, Bolton was a little bit he passed away in he was born in 1885. Bolton was born in 1877. So he's a little bit older. I don't know. You guys tell me. What do you think? Now, he lived in the neighborhood of Faubourg Marigny, and that's a neighborhood in New Orleans, the 1885. And even though he claimed to be a year older for his draft registration for World War One in 1918, but they traced their Creole ancestry 4 generations to the 18th century. Now, his birth date and year, they're not absolutely positive since there was no birth certificate. So it wasn't enforced until 1914. So he could say that he was born a year earlier and they would just, you know, have to go by it, right? They'd have to go by it. So let me tell you about his parents. Now his parents were Martin Edward Joseph Lamoth, and he was known as Edward Joseph Lamoth, and he was a bricklayer, but he was an occasional trombonist, and his mom was Louise Hermance Monet, and she was a domestic worker, and they were never legally married when his father left his mother. He was 3 years old. And so then his mother married William Moten in 1894. So then he adopted his stepfather's surname, changed it to Morton, adapting Ferd as the unofficial forename. Now he had 2 sisters, Eugenie and Agnes Colas. Now let's talk about his touring because he often he's a 14. He's a piano player in a brothel. And he would sing some kind of smutty lyrics. And then he would use the nickname Jelly Roll. So what is the slang for? Female genitalia. What? This is where I'm learning this stuff and I'm like, what? So, but he was living with his church going great grandmother. So he told her that, oh, I'm a night watchman in the barrel factory. But she played him. She went to where he was working and she disowned him. She's like, Then when his grandmother found out he's playing jazz in sporting houses in the district, she told him that she was disgraced and his family forbade him to live in the house. She told him that devil music would surely bring about his downfall. So the Cornish Rex Stewart recalled that Morton, he chose like the nom de plume Morton to protect his family from disgrace, um, if he was identified as a whorehouse professor. Oh my god! Oh my god! Okay, so 1904. He started his tour of the South in the U.S. and he was working at minstrel shows, and then he was for example, Will Bimbov's like Chocolate Drops, and like he was gambling and he was composing at the same time. That's where he did Jelly Roll Blues, Northern Blues, Frog Eye More Rag, Nemo Dance, King Porter Stomp, and those were all composed during that time period. And but there's like pianists like James P. Johnson and Willie Lyon Smith. They saw him perform in Chicago in 1910 and New York 1911. I am sure they got a real treat. Now he toured with his girlfriend in vaudeville, and then they were in Chicago for a few years, and then he started to put his like compositions on paper even more. And in 1915, like as I mentioned before, that was the first time that it was published, like jazz composition. And so right then he was employed by Ben Shook Jr. around 1916. And now Shook was affiliated with the Jubilee Club that was led by Mabel Davis, who was a contralto singer, and was the Flux University the Fisk University Jubilee Singers was a founding member. And in 1917, Jelly Roll, he went to California with the band leader William Manuel Johnson, and his sister. And Morton's tango is called The Crave. It was popular in Hollywood. So he was invited to perform uh, at the nightclub that was it's the Hotel Patricia in Vancouver, Canada. And a writer, an author, his name is Mark Miller. He said it's an extended period of itinerancy as a pianist, vaudeville performer, gambler, hustler, and a legend would have it, pimp. Okay, so Jelly Roll goes back to Chicago in 1923, and then he claimed the authorship of the Wolverines, which would be popular as a Wolverine Blues. And then he released his first like commercial recordings. Now he did that with different, as a piano soloist and with jazz bands, um, on record. Very cool. Had a contract with Victor Talking Machine Company, so he could do like his with his band, do like well rehearsed arrangements and at the studios in Chicago. And then he had his Red Hot Peppers, including like Kid Ory, Omar Simeon, George Mitchell, Johnny St. Cyr, Barney Bigard, Johnny Dodds, Baby Dodds, and Andrew Hilaire. So that's who he had in there with him. And he continued to record for Victor, even though he kind of had like trouble finding musicians um, to play the jazz that he visualized, right? So with an arrangement of other musicians, he failed to produce a hit. Now, because of the Great Depression, RCA Victor, they did not want to renew his contract. So that was 1931. So in New York, he kept playing and he struggled financially. In 1934, he actually was on a radio show, and then he toured with a burlesque band. And in 1935, his 30-year-old King Porter Stomp, arranged by Fletcher Henderson, it became Benny Goodman's first hit and a swing standard, but Morton never received royalties for the recordings. Now, see, that chaps my hide. That makes me mad because that happened to so many musicians where other musicians will bite off it. And I talk about like in my last video how, rock music and alternative music and other genres are affected by these early forms in Black musicians that actually formulated their vision and did not have success with it. A lot of times died penniless, and people with a lighter hue took it and ran with it and became very successful. It became acceptable because of the fact that they were of a different ethnicity. It's crazy. Now, this is interesting because scholars that are well versed in Jelly Roll's like his history, they say that he was aware that if he had been born in 1890, he would have been too young to be like claimed to be the inventor of jazz. But I guess there's a possibility that he was telling the truth, even with Buddy Bolton, because they're saying that he played ragtime but not jazz. But ragtime mixed with some other components became what was known as jazz. So, like I said, different people that know music history might think differently. You might say, hey, it was ragtime. He played jazz. But a lot of like the contemporaries in New Orleans say that that's not true. Okay, last but not least, like how did he pass? And a music box owner, stabbed him. He was a friend of his, but yes, he stabbed him in the head and the chest. And the nearby whites only hospital, they said, nope, we're not treating him. So then he had to be transported further away where they took Black patients. He ended up having ice put on his wounds for several hours before they even looked at the injury, attended to it. So then what happened? His wounds didn't heal completely, and he was often ill and became short of breath easily. So then his wife's like, his wife, Mabel, who he was married to then, said, let's go to this hospital in New York for 3 months. Like he continued to suffer from his respiratory problems. He traveled to LA with intent to kind of like restart his career. But unfortunately, he passed away on July 10th, 1941, after his like 11-day stay in the hospital, the County General Hospital. They believe he is 50 years old. But a historian always like to hear what they have to say. But in 2000, he said that Morton's arrogance and bumptious persona alienated so many musicians that few of them attended his funeral. Wow. There are so many, including Duke Ellington, that were Kid Ory, that were in Los Angeles but did not go to the funeral. Now, Mercer Ellington, Duke Ellington's son, did attend. But yeah, wow. Pretty interesting, right? What do you think? Was Jelly Roll the inventor of jazz? I'm curious. Comment below and let's move on to our next. So that's it. Those are the two musicians that I wanted to talk about in the formulation of jazz. The debate is now open. You can feel free to comment. Tell me what you think, what your thoughts are. Say, Kat, what are you talking about? I would love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this and you find value in this, please, and you're still here, please subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Okay, we'll see you on the next one. All right, take care.